when you step into the cockpit of like a modern commercial airliner, you were immediately confronted with this incredibly complex wall of glowing screens.
Oh, yeah, all the dials and readouts. It's wild.
Right. It is this absolute masterpiece of measurement. I mean, the pilot can tell you the exact altitude, the precise airspeed.
Probably the hydraulic pressure in the left landing gear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even the fuel efficiency down to the literal drop. And it's all built on this absolute assurance that if the numbers look good, well, the flight is healthy.
Which makes total sense for an airplane.
Right. But imagine for a second that every single one of those dials is glowing green. The engines are humming perfectly, the fuel tanks are full.
The altitude is exactly where it should be.
Yeah, but the plane is flying thousands of miles in the completely wrong direction.
Oh, wow. That is a terrifying thought.
It is. Because all of that brilliant, flawless measurement is simply documenting a catastrophe in real time.
Yeah, you're measuring the wrong thing perfectly.
Exactly. We are so obsessed with dashboards today. We think, if the line goes up and to the right, we are winning. But today, we are looking at a terrifying reality.
And that reality is what exactly?
What if the numbers you have been celebrating are the very numbers that are hiding your greatest weakness?
Man, that is an incredibly unsettling image, but it perfectly captures the core tension we are unpacking today.
It really does.
Because, we live in a dashboard-obsessed culture. From the moment we wake up, we're checking our sleep scores.
Oh, guilty. Step counts, bank balances, all of it.
Followers, quarterly projections. We have been trained, almost from birth, to equate visibility with value.
And measurement with mastery.
Right. The psychological trap is that if the numbers are going up, we just automatically assume the underlying health of the system or the person is going up too.
Right, which isn't always true.
No, the reality is far more complicated and, frankly, far more dangerous.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because today's deep dive is fundamentally a rescue mission.
A rescue mission, I like that.
Yeah. We're looking at this incredibly profound source document titled Measuring What Matters. And it centers heavily on Christian ministries, spiritual leadership, and churches.
But the implications are way broader than that.
Oh, absolutely. As we dive into this material, it is glaringly obvious that the implications here are massive for absolutely anyone listening to us right now.
Yeah, whether you are running a tech startup or managing a corporate team.
Or leading a nonprofit, raising a family, or literally just trying to evaluate your own personal growth and character.
Right, we are confronting a terrifying question about how we define success.
Exactly. So to be clear, we are not going on an attack against numbers today. This is a rescue mission for what truly matters, because we have a habit of conflating momentum with maturity.
Right. And that conflation is really the heart of the issue here.
Right.
Human systems, whether they are massive corporations or just local community groups, are naturally wired to reward what can be counted quickly.
And displayed publicly.
Yes. We love things that can be graphed. It makes us feel safe. But the argument in the text is that this instinct creates a very specific kind of vulnerability. It allows for the development of what is called a sick soul inside a healthy-looking system.
A sick soul in a healthy-looking system. Wow.
Yeah, you can optimize your outward metrics to the point of absolute perfection while the internal core is just quietly rotting away.
The great illusion of visible success. That's really our starting point here. The wrong scoreboard.
It really is.
It's fascinating because any purpose-driven organization, not just churches, often ends up adopting the metrics of the marketplace without any discernment whatsoever.
Right. We just default to profit, market share, efficiency.
Attendance, budgets, social media shares, we count the crowd, and we just blindly assume we built a community.
Which are two very different things.
Totally. It actually reminds me of when I bought a fitness bike during the pandemic.
Oh no, where is this going?
Well, I measured my success by how aesthetically pleasing the bike looked in my living room, the fact that my account was set up and, telling my friends I had one.
So you had all the metrics of a healthy person.
Exactly. Except I wasn't actually pedaling the thing to fix my cardiovascular system.
Yeah.
I optimized for the aesthetic of health, not the reality of it.
What's fascinating here is the psychology behind why we do that. Why do we love these superficial metrics?
Because they're easy.
Partially, yeah. But mostly because counting gives us the illusion of mastery and control. If you can count it, you can manage the story around it.
Oh, that makes sense. You can put it in a slick quarterly report.
Exactly. You can show it to a board of directors or a donor base or your Instagram followers and just say, look, I am succeeding.
Right.
But the core thesis we're examining is that true metrics, what the text calls heaven's metrics, are anti-vanity, not anti-numbers.
So they aren't saying numbers are evil.
Not at all. God, or the universe, or however you want to frame the ultimate reality of truth, isn't allergic to numbers.
Right.
The danger is entirely about when those numbers become a false assurance, when your external demands and your visible outputs completely outrun your internal formation.
Man, a sick soul in a healthy-looking system. That phrase just stops you in your tracks. Let's really think about what that looks like in the real world for you listening.
Yeah, let's break it down.
You can have the lights, the crowds, the polished presentations, the buzzing social media channels. You can have the explosive revenue growth.
Everything looks perfect on paper.
Right. And yet, underneath all of that, the actual life of the mission, the culture, the integrity, the relationships is incredibly thin.
And fragile.
Yeah, completely fragile and entirely dependent on constant external input. You are celebrating a crowd, but you are failing to cultivate a people. You have a mob, not a movement.
And we see this play out throughout history. The text brings up a brilliant biblical context we need to look at, the contrast between the story of Saul and David.
Oh, this is a great example.
If you look at Saul, he was exactly what the human metric system demanded. The ancient text describes him as tall, strong, and having this undeniable, charismatic public presence.
He looked the part.
He looked the part of a king. He fit the public imagination of leadership perfectly. He's the guy you'd cast in the movie version of a king.
Right, totally.
But the ultimate verdict was that human beings look on the outward appearance, but the true measure of a leader is found in the heart. The obvious crowd-pleasing candidate was bypassed for David, a shepherd who looked completely improbable to everyone else.
Right, because Saul was what the people wanted, but David was what the mission actually required.
Exactly.
If you put Saul on a modern corporate dashboard, he's your top performer in Q1. But when you look at his actual leadership, Saul was entirely about appearance management.
100%.
When he failed, and he failed spectacularly, he was vastly more concerned with looking good in front of the elders and maintaining his public image than he was with actual systemic course correction or repentance.
He just wanted to save face.
Yeah. We see that every day in corporate PR crises.
Absolutely. And that introduces one of the most severe warnings we can look at from the text, the metaphor of the whitewashed tombs.
Oh, that's a heavy one.
It comes from the teachings of Jesus, where he confronted leaders who were absolute masters of public perception. They were, the influencers of their day.
The ancient influencers, yeah.
They cleaned the outside of the cup perfectly. They looked beautiful on the outside, like a freshly painted gleaming tomb. But inside, they were full of decay and death.
Wow.
The organization, the religious system, the leadership structure, it was externally flawless and internally hollow. They had mastered the metrics of the marketplace, but failed the metrics of the soul.
I want to throw an analogy at you to see if this tracks with the text.
Yeah, let's hear it.
It's like downloading a new app that has this absolutely incredible award-winning user interface. The graphics are stunning, the animations are smooth, the onboarding process is flawless, the branding is incredibly hip.
Okay, I'm with you.
But the back-end code, the actual architecture that makes the app do what it's supposed to do, is fundamentally broken. It's spaghetti code.
Oh, yeah.
It looks amazing on your home screen, but the second you actually try to use it to process heavy data or perform its intended function during a stress test, it just crashes. The visible interface have completely outrun the invisible infrastructure.
That is spot on. And what's fascinating here is, if we connect this to the bigger picture, that is exactly the danger of momentum versus maturity.
Momentum versus maturity.
Right. An organization can become highly visible without becoming fruitful. You can have this incredible user interface, the lights, the music, the branding, the massive event turnout, the viral marketing campaign.
All the visible stuff.
But when the pressure of real life hits, when a genuine crisis occurs, or when a moral failure tests the foundation, the system crashes.
Because there's no back-end code.
Exactly. There is no back-end code of character, discipleship, deep relationships, or resilience. You've engineered fame, but you haven't cultivated faithfulness. You've built an interface, not an infrastructure.
And here's the really terrifying part of human nature. You optimize for what you measure. It is an unavoidable law of human behavior. If the scoreboard rewards visibility, leaders will naturally, sometimes subconsciously, build for visibility. If your ultimate metric of success is attendance or active daily users, you will optimize every single decision to draw a crowd.
You'll lower the barrier to entry.
Exactly. You will soften the message. You will rely on gimmicks. Because gathering an audience is the goal. But gathering an audience is fundamentally different from forming a healthy human being.
Which is exactly why the premise here isn't that measurement is the enemy. It's that we need better measurement. We have to rescue accountability from reductionism.
Right.
If the goal of your life or your business or your nonprofit is just to gather a crowd, then go ahead and use the marketplace metrics. They work perfectly for that.
Sure.
But if your goal is to see actual lives changed, communities stabilized, homes reordered, and deep, lasting character formed, then measuring attendance alone is a delusion. It's like measuring the health of a hospital by counting how many people are sitting in the waiting room.
Oh, man. Measuring the waiting room instead of the healing rate, that is a staggering thought.
Yeah.
You could have a packed waiting room, and it looks like the hospital is booming. But if no one is actually getting cured, it's a disaster zone, not a place of healing.
Exactly.
Okay, but this brings up a huge tension. If visibility and attendance are such flawed metrics, we have to look at the primary engine that organizations use to generate that visibility, which is events.
The big gatherings.
Yeah, the conferences, the Sunday services, the weekend retreats, the massive corporate summits. And the material we are analyzing explicitly states that motion is not the same as direction.
It is a critical distinction that most modern leaders fail to make. We have to understand the concept of emotional efficiency.
Emotional efficiency. What does that mean in this context?
Well, events are incredibly emotionally efficient. Think about it. In the span of 45 minutes or an hour, with the right lighting, the right acoustic environment, the perfect music building to a crescendo.
And a highly gifted speaker.
Exactly, a charismatic communicator. You can create a hyper-concentrated atmosphere. You can compress what should be a slow, steady, spiritual, or motivational evolution into a single, potent, overwhelming moment.
And people leave those moments feeling completely energized. They leave feeling like they've fundamentally changed.
Right, they buy the merch.
They post the quote on Instagram.
Yeah.
They feel like they can conquer the world. But the warning here is that this easily devolves into the seduction of operational success.
Yes.
Because events are, frankly, the easiest things to manage and improve. You can tweak the run of show, you can rebrand the graphics, you can upgrade the line array sound system, you can hire a better speaker.
It gives leaders this intoxicating feeling of progress.
Because they are managing motion, they are moving pieces around the board. But motion is not direction. High attendance at a high-energy event does not equal internal formation.
Precisely. Because what are you actually measuring? You are only measuring proximity to religious or motivational activity. You are measuring exposure. You are not measuring discipleship or deep learning. To illustrate this, the text looks at a vivid contrast between two hypothetical organizations. Let's just call them Church A and Church B.
Okay.
Church A is an absolute blur of constant activity. If you look at their calendar, it's packed. Rallies, summits, launches, vision nights, youth explosions.
Sounds exhausting.
It is. The room is always full. The energy is always at a fever pitch. The bass is always pumping. And the leaders are exhausted, completely burned out. But they are thrilled because the dashboard is glowing green. Everything looks like it's moving at light speed.
But the people in Church A, the actual attendees, are fundamentally consumers. They are dependent on the event to feel spiritually or emotionally alive.
Yes, exactly.
If you take away the band, or if the charismatic leader goes on sabbatical, the people completely deflate. They don't know how to feed themselves.
Right. Now, contrast that with Church B. Their calendar is radically simpler. They don't have the massive production value. They aren't renting out arenas.
Okay, so what do they do?
Quietly, behind the scenes, something entirely different is happening. People are learning how to pray in the quiet of their own living rooms. Marriages that were on the brink of divorce are doing the hard, unglamorous work of restoration.
Wow.
Older, wiser members are spending hours mentoring younger members over mediocre coffee. People are learning to confess their failures and carry each other's burdens slowly, steadily over years.
That's a huge contrast.
Now, from the outside, to a cultural observer, Church A looks like a massive, undeniable success, and Church B looks stagnant, maybe even a little boring. But Church B is actually the one progressing because they are forming resilient people, not just hosting independent consumers.
Okay, I have to push back here. I have to play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
Because if I'm a leader listening to this, I'm getting defensive. Look, honestly, if my church or my business or my nonprofit is empty, I'm failing. You can't disciple empty chairs.
Fair point.
You can't mentor someone who isn't in the room. Don't events matter? Don't we need that initial spark? Don't we need that massive mountaintop experience to awaken people, to get them in the door, to capture their attention in a noisy world so that the slow work can even begin?
Sure.
If a laser light show and a killer band gets them in the door, why shouldn't I optimize for that?
That is the exact defense, the exact friction point that every event-driven leader will bring up. And it's a fair question, but the framework we are looking at doesn't dismiss events entirely. It doesn't say events are inherently evil.
Okay, so what does it say?
What it says is that events are doorways, not destinations. They are catalysts, not conclusions. A spark is wonderful, but a spark is not a fire.
Well, that's good.
If you try to heat your house with nothing but a continuous series of sparks, you're going to freeze to death, and you're going to be exhausted from constantly striking the flame. The danger occurs when the event stops being the doorway and becomes the primary unit of measurement.
When the mountaintop becomes the entire topography of the organization.
Exactly. Then you have a massive problem.
So you can visit the mountaintop, but you can't live there. You have to come down and actually farm the valley where the soil is.
Yes.
And there's a fascinating look at how Jesus historically interacted with the crowd that perfectly illustrates this. I mean, he was the ultimate event draw, right? He drew massive multitudes, he fed thousands, he performed literal miracles.
The biggest crowds of the day.
Right. But what did he do at the height of his popularity? He constantly withdrew. He walked away from the massive crowds.
Which makes no sense to a modern marketer.
Not at all. Why did he do it? Because he deeply understood that the crowd gathered for the benefits, the free food, the spectacle, the healing, the entertainment. But a covenant people, a true community of deep transformation, gathers around allegiance.
Right.
They gather around a shared costly commitment, not just the perks of the show.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this raises an important question about our cultural hardwiring. We have to admit that modern Western culture is fundamentally addicted to moments.
Oh, for sure. We love a good moment.
Yeah. We are addicted to the immediate feedback loop. We want the instant transformation. We want to read a self-help book on Friday, attend a weekend seminar, have a cathartic crying session, and be completely fixed by Monday morning.
If only it were that easy.
Right. But the reality of deep growth, what the text calls a logic of the kingdom, operates on the slow, unsexy logic of seeds and roots. God, or the natural order of deep human development, is not in a hurry the way we are. He grows oaks, not grass.
Wow.
He forms character over decades of obscurity, not in a single weekend retreat.
He grows oaks, not grass. I love that. That's the slow mathematics of reality.
Yeah.
If you want grass, you can throw some seed down and have a green lawn in a few weeks. But if you want an oak tree that can withstand a hurricane, it takes 50 years.
And a lot of hidden work.
Yes. And part of that process is that a seed literally has to fall into the dirt and die. It has to disappear into total obscurity, buried in the dark, before it can multiply.
Which completely defies our modern appetite for acceleration.
We want Amazon Prime spirituality.
Ah.
We want the visible, towering stalk of the plant without the hidden dying of the seed. We want the massive public impact without the painful, invisible obscurity.
And when leaders overvalue events, they are actually robbing their people of that necessary obscurity. They are short-circuiting the process.
How so?
If you train a congregation or a team to think that if they aren't feeling a massive emotional high, or if they aren't constantly energized, then they aren't growing, you are setting them up for a profound crisis of faith or burnout. We mistake exposure to heat for actual transformation.
Wow, exposure to heat.
Yeah, you can sit near a massive bonfire and feel incredibly warm, but the second you walk away and go back to your normal life, you are going to be cold again, unless you have actually caught fire yourself. Events give you external heat. Discipleship is catching fire internally.
That is such a crucial distinction. The external heat versus the internal fire. And this naturally transitions us into the next massive stumbling block. Yes. Because if you are going to host all these massive high-heat events, you need a place to put the people. You need infrastructure. You need real estate. Which brings us to the tension between the architecture of the soul versus physical buildings.
It's a huge shift.
How physical spaces can be incredible blessings, but also how they can become incredibly dangerous distractions and literal idols.
It is a very delicate balance, and we have to approach it with nuance. A building, in and of itself, is amoral. It can be a profound gift.
Sure, you need a roof.
Right. A physical structure shelters the weak, it hosts the hungry, it provides a stable, predictable space for worship, community, and safety.
Hmm?
But the psychological danger arises when the building subtly shifts from being a tool for the mission to being a monument to the organization's insecurity. When the physical structure becomes a substitute for the spiritual structure, the leadership has lost the plot.
It's so deeply true, and we see it everywhere. It is exponentially easier to raise $1 million for a new sanctuary roof or a massive new corporate headquarters with a state-of-the-art espresso bar than it is to cultivate deep repentance, vulnerability, and integrity in a group of people.
Oh, absolutely.
You can photograph a new building wing. You can put it on the cover of your annual newsletter. You can point to the steel beams going up and say to your critics and your donors, look at our progress. Look at our success.
But you can't photograph the internal stuff.
Exactly. You cannot easily photograph someone quietly overcoming a 10-year hidden addiction. You got to put a plaque on a fractured family that is slowly, painfully learning how to forgive each other at the dinner table.
No, you can't.
Because the internal work is invisible. The visible work, the bricks and mortar, naturally outruns it.
And this is where we have to look back at the foundational metaphors for true community. If you look at the true biblical metaphors for the church, they are entirely organic and relational.
Like a family.
Right. The church is called a body, a bride, a flock, a family, a priesthood of living stones. Notice what is missing from that list.
Real estate.
Exactly. It is never, ever described as static real estate. It is a living, breathing organism. When a community begins to equate its physical expansion with its spiritual depth, the building takes on a theological weight it was never meant to carry. It becomes an idol of stone.
There's this chilling historical example that illustrates this perfectly. Look at the ancient prophets confronting the nation of Israel.
Oh, the temple sacrifices.
Yes. The prophets were absolutely screaming at the nation, pronouncing judgment, because the people were offering these perfect, meticulous sacrifices in this magnificent, glittering temple. But outside the temple walls, they were completely neglecting justice, exploiting the poor, and ignoring mercy.
Sacred space completely devoid of sacred life.
Exactly. And the prophets essentially said, this is a fraud. God hates this. The massive, beautiful temple could not protect a rebellious people from the consequences of their lack of character. The building was a smokescreen for a rotting society.
This raises an important question for anyone in leadership today, whether you run a church, a school, or a business. Are your board meetings discussing your facilities more than they are discussing formation?
That is a piercing question.
Do you know the exact condition of your HVAC system and your roof better than you know the emotional and spiritual condition of your people?
Wow.
When the leadership's primary overriding anxiety shifts from the spiritual health of the people to the financial maintenance of the property, the building has ceased to be a tool. It has become an idol that demands constant sacrifice, usually the sacrifice of the leader's time, energy, and ultimately their soul.
There's a concept I want to bring up here called holy detachment, and I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's this historical posture of treating physical spaces lightly.
Like Abraham.
Right. Think of Abraham, who was promised a nation but lived his entire life as a nomad in tents because he was looking for a city built by God, not by human hands. Or Jesus, who sparked the greatest movement in human history but literally said he had nowhere to lay his head.
Yeah, they weren't tied down.
It doesn't mean owning a building is a sin, but it means treating them strictly as tools, not trophies. I was thinking about this in modern terms, and it's like viewing a building as a launching pad rather than a boundary.
I love that. A launching pad.
Right. If you think the church or the mission only happens inside those specific physical walls, you've taken what should be a staging area, a place to gather, equip, and send people out into the world, and you've turned it into a containment zone.
A containment zone. That is a devastatingly accurate way to describe it. What happens when it becomes a containment zone?
The mission dies.
Yeah, the community becomes an inward-facing club. Its primary existence is to generate enough revenue to maintain its own infrastructure, rather than being a missionary training center that exists to be emptied out into the surrounding culture.
Right.
The building should be the hub, not the totality of the life. When the building becomes the totality, you stop leading a living movement and you start managing a museum of past successes. You're just a curator of a holy building.
And let's be honest, keeping up that museum, running the massive events, building the huge campuses, All of that naturally generates a ton of public attention.
Which feels good at first.
It does.
Huh.
Which brings us to perhaps the most fragile, terrifying, and seductive metric of all public perception and the idol of applause: being well-liked, being admired. The material we are diving into warns that being universally admired is an intoxicating but incredibly fragile metric.
It is fragile because it is fundamentally unstable. Public approval is a weather vane. It changes with every gust of cultural wind.
Oh, absolutely.
The algorithm of human approval naturally rewards what is emotionally satisfying, what is culturally fluent, and what is immediately comforting. It does not reward what is costly, difficult, or prophetically true. There is a deeply unsettling insight here from the text.
What is it?
It says, praise reveals what people enjoy. Pressure reveals what they believe.
Wow. Praise reveals what people enjoy. Pressure reveals what they believe. That is a quote to stick on your bathroom mirror. Because we all want to be praised. It's an evolutionary survival mechanism to want the tribe to accept you. But when an organization, or a person, relies heavily on that applause to feel successful, there is a subtle, almost imperceptible shift that happens in their decision-making.
They start asking the wrong questions.
Exactly. You stop asking, is this true? Is this right? And you start asking, will this work? How will this play on Twitter?
Will this get likes?
Will this keep the high net worth donors happy? Will this fill the seats on Sunday?
And that, right there, is how truth begins to bend. It rarely happens with a massive, sudden, villainous compromise. People don't wake up one day and decide to sell out.
No, it's gradual.
It happens by tiny degrees of avoidance. A leader notices that certain hard truths or certain demands of integrity create tension in the room, so they just quietly stop emphasizing them. They round off the sharp edges, they soften the rhetoric.
Because they want to keep the peace.
Right. Repentance, which implies we are wrong and need to change, gets minimized because it offends the modern ego. Discipleship gets watered down into mere self-improvement and life hacking. The radical, costly nature of truth gets domesticated into a crowd-pleasing performance.
The ultimate historical example of this is Jesus' popularity crash. It's wild to look at the timeline.
It really is.
The exact same crowds that threw palm branches at his feet, treating him like a conquering hero and wanting to crown him king, were literally shouting for his execution just a few days later.
Talk about a shift in public perception.
Right. Why? What changed? The crowd didn't change. His refusal to coddle them did. When his teaching became too costly, when he refused to just be their political miracle worker and demanded actual ego-destroying surrender, the applause didn't just evaporate. It turned into venom.
And we see historical echoes of this everywhere. The most faithful, world-changing movements in history, the early abolitionists, the pioneering missionaries, the reformers, the prophets, were almost universally mocked, marginalized, and completely misunderstood in their own time.
They weren't popular.
Not at all. They were not trending on the cultural dashboards of their day. They were considered dangerous or foolish. If they had been measuring their success by public perception and focus groups, they would have quit or compromised immediately. They had a different compass.
There is a quote here that hits so hard. Fame can be engineered. Faithfulness must be cultivated.
That's a good one.
Fame can absolutely be hacked. In the modern world, you can buy the right ads, hire the right PR crisis team, use the right algorithm-friendly keywords, manufacture outrage, and become famous. You can engineer an audience.
But you can't engineer character.
Exactly. Faithfulness, integrity, character, that takes decades in the dark. It cannot be hacked. So I want to ask you, the listener, right now, as you are driving or washing the dishes, think about your own life, your own career, your own family. Are you spending the majority of your energy managing your image, or are you actually cultivating your character? Because you cannot do both with equal devotion.
That is the ultimate dividing line. An individual or a community shaped by the need for applause will eventually lose the courage to speak plainly. They become captive to their own audience.
They're held hostage.
Yes, held hostage by the people they're supposed to be leading. But a leader who is anchored in a deeper truth, who isn't addicted to the dopamine hit of approval, can endure misunderstanding. They can be faithful when they are completely hidden and steady when they are overly praised, because the crowd's reaction is no longer their compass. Their internal dashboard is measuring something entirely different.
Okay, so we've spent all this time deconstructing the false metrics. We've torn down the illusion of numbers, the trap of motion and events, the idolatry of real estate, and the total fragility of applause.
So what's left?
Right, if we strip all of that away, the obvious screaming question is, what is the true scoreboard? What does a healthy, functioning dashboard actually look like? This brings us to the core of the alternative, which is obedience and transformation.
This is where we pivot from diagnosis to prescription. The true metric, the foundation of this alternate reality, begins with obedience. Now, we have to be incredibly careful to define what obedience means here, because in our modern hyper-individualistic context, the word obedience carries a massive amount of toxic baggage.
Oh, absolutely. It sounds controlling.
Right. We think of it as blind servility or rigid rule-keeping, or giving up our autonomy to an abusive authority, but that is a distortion. The framework we are exploring frames obedience as the natural, organic fruit of faith and the intensely practical language of love.
Like the ancient text says.
Yes, if you love me, keep my commandments. It's covenant language. It's about relationship, not corporate compliance.
Right. We have to radically separate obedience from legalism.
Yeah.
Legalism is toxic.
Extremely.
Legalism is when you obey in order to earn favor or to prove your worth. It's anxious, it's self-protective, it's constantly comparing yourself to others. It's keeping a spreadsheet of your good deeds to show God or the universe how great you are.
It's exhausting.
It is. But true, healthy obedience is responding to favor. You obey because you have already been accepted, and it's a humble, deeply relational response to a good reality. It's like a healthy marriage. You don't do the dishes to earn your spouse's love. You do the dishes because you love them and want to serve the home you share.
Exactly. A legalist uses obedience as a tool to build a righteous image for public consumption. They want everyone to see how good they are. But a true disciple uses obedience to walk in quiet communion with the truth.
That's beautiful.
And from that slow, daily relational obedience flows actual transformation. Transformation is the visible, tangible evidence of an invisible reality taking root in a person's life. It is not an abstract, mystical, floaty feeling. We aren't talking about glowing auras. The demand here is that transformation must be highly practical, incredibly grounded, and profoundly ordinary.
And what is the ultimate testing ground for this? Where is the very first place that transformation should be visible? It's the home. The home is the first witness.
That's where it gets real.
This is where it gets uncomfortably real. You can be praised publicly, you can be a dynamic, charismatic speaker, you could be a highly effective corporate executive who hits every Q4 target. But if your home is ruled by fear, control, constant anxiety, or simmering contempt, then true transformation has not taken root in your life.
You're a public success and a private failure.
Exactly. Real character change alters how spouses speak to each other in the kitchen when they're tired. It changes how children are spoken to and disciplined at the dinner table. It changes your private screen time habits before bed when no one is watching.
It forces us to look away from the grand stages and focus on hidden obedience. What are the real metrics of a transformed life?
Tell me.
Telling the truth when a lie would be so much easier and far more profitable. Refusing to participate in the toxic office gossip, even if it alienates you from the inner circle. Forgiving someone quietly, internally, without demanding a groveling public apology. Practicing radical generosity when your budget feels tight, and making sure absolutely no one will ever know you gave the money.
Those are hard.
Very hard. These are the metrics that actually matter. They are small, they are agonizingly slow, and they are completely unphotographable. You cannot put them on a dashboard.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
The ultimate test of transformation is what I like to call the emotional weather of a room.
Emotional weather.
Yeah. A truly transformed person literally changes the moral and emotional climate around them just by entering the room. Think about the people in your life. Some people walk into a room and the anxiety level spikes.
Oh, I know those people.
We all do. You feel defensive, you feel on edge, you feel like you have to perform. But a transformed person, a transformed home, feels fundamentally safer. A transformed leader becomes steadier, less defensive, less easily offended.
You can just feel it.
You can actually feel the difference in your nervous system when someone is leading out of ego and self-protection versus leading out of a surrendered, secure heart. They stop using people as tools for their own success and start genuinely sacrificially serving them.
And that shift in the emotional weather, that deep lowering of anxiety and raising of psychological safety, is the undeniable proof of internal change. Let's make a critical distinction here. Information can tell you what is true, but formation teaches you how to live what is true.
That's a huge difference.
In our modern era, we are drowning in information. You can consume 100 deep dives, read 1,000 books, and quote all the right philosophers. But if your actual reflexes, your patience when cut off in traffic, your humility when criticized, your ability to endure suffering without becoming a bitter, cynical person, if those haven't changed, then you have merely accumulated knowledge. You
Right.
haven't experienced transformation. You are just a smarter version of your unbroken self.
And once a person actually experiences that deep internal transformation, they don't just sit still. They don't just sit in a pew on Sunday or at a desk on Monday and soak it all in.
They do something with it.
Right. A healthy living organism in nature does one specific thing above all else. It reproduces. If it doesn't reproduce, it's a genetic dead end. This leads us directly into the quiet power of reproduction and the concept of generational depth.
This is the ultimate undeniable test of life. Living things reproduce, dead things do not. And this framework makes a stark, uncompromising claim: true growth is not measured by addition, but by multiplication.
Addition versus multiplication.
Yes. The goal of any healthy community, movement, or leadership structure is to move people from being mere consumers of a product to becoming active reproducers of life.
It's that agricultural logic again. Jesus said, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. We talked earlier about the seed dying in obscurity, but here it's applied specifically to the act of reproduction.
Why is it so hard to reproduce leaders?
Because in order to multiply, there has to be a literal death of the ego. There has to be a death of the need for control. As a leader, you have to be willing to pour your life, your time, and your secrets into someone else. Train them, and then here is the agonizing part: release them to go do greater things than you did.
Yeah, that is tough.
It requires the death of self-protection. It means letting someone else get the credit.
It requires building an ecosystem of formation. If an organization is just hosting massive events, it's simply building a highly efficient supply chain for consumers. People come, they consume the inspiration, they leave.
Which is addition, not multiplication.
Right. But if it wants to reproduce, it has to build a messy, complex ecosystem.
Right.
And there's a brilliant metric for this from the text G1, G2, and G3.
Let's hear it.
Let me explain. G1 is the first generation, the people you directly lead, mentor, or disciple. G2 is the second generation, the people that your G1 people go on to mentor. And G3 is the third generation, the disciples of your disciples.
This concept completely blew my mind when I first grasped it, because a leader or an organization can celebrate a massive, staggering G1. They can have 5,000 people show up to hear the primary leader speak. The dashboard looks incredible.
Glowing green.
Right. But if none of those 5,000 people are equipped, empowered, and released to go out and mentor a G2, the movement has completely failed at multiplication. It is a dead end. It is a giant, stagnant reservoir of water with absolutely no river flowing out of it.
When the charismatic leader dies or retires, the whole thing collapses overnight.
Exactly.
And we see the alternative modeled explicitly in ancient texts. Look at Paul's letter to his protege, Timothy. He writes this one sentence that contains the entire architecture of a lasting movement. He tells Timothy to take the things he has heard from Paul and entrust them to faithful people who will then be able to teach others also.
That's incredible.
That is 4 distinct generations of leadership encoded into a single sentence. Paul to Timothy, that's G1. Timothy to faithful people, that's G2. And faithful people to others, that's G3. That cascading generational depth is the only way a movement survives the centuries.
It's the difference between being a sponge and being a conduit.
Okay.
Think about the physics of it. A sponge just sits there soaking up water. It gets fatter, it gets heavier, it gets saturated.
Right.
That is the ultimate spiritual or intellectual consumer. They listen to all the deep dives, they go to all the retreats, they read all the theology, and they just swell up with information.
Yeah.
But they never wring themselves out for anyone else.
And just hoard it.
Exactly. But a conduit is a pipe. It lets the water flow through it to water the dry ground somewhere else. A conduit doesn't hoard the water. Its entire purpose is transmission.
That is a perfect analogy. And here's another one that visualizes the same reality, the orchard. Imagine you are walking into a massive field and you see this giant, towering, incredibly leafy tree. It looks majestically impressive from a distance.
Okay, I picture it.
But when you get up close, you realize it has absolutely no fruit on its branches. It is consuming all the sunlight and all the water, but producing nothing. Then, right next to it, is a much smaller, unassuming, kind of gnarly-looking tree.
Not nearly as impressive.
Right. It doesn't look majestic, but its branches are heavy with fruit, and it is actively dropping seeds into the soil around it, and you can see tiny saplings starting to sprout at its base. Which tree is actually the future of the orchard?
It's the smaller tree, 100%. Visible success without reproduction is just a giant leafy barren tree stealing nutrients from the soil.
Exactly.
But okay, let's get fiercely practical here because I know what the pragmatists listening are thinking.
They're wanting the how-to.
Right. If we are supposed to be shifting our entire focus away from attendance, spreadsheets, and budgets, and leaning heavily into these deep, organic, hidden metrics of obedience, character change, and generational reproduction, how on earth do you actually manage that? If I throw away my spreadsheets, are we just going to drift? How do leaders track the health of a soul without turning people into cold data points? We can't just operate on vague vibes.
Right. Absolutely not.
This brings us to the crucial balance: accountability without reductionism.
This is the ultimate tightrope walk of modern leadership. You are absolutely right. We cannot just drift into this vague spirituality where nothing is ever measured, no one is ever held accountable, and everyone just assumes things are fine because we have good intentions.
That sounds like a mess.
Vague spirituality is a guaranteed recipe for institutional drift, laziness, and hidden decay. But at the same time, the fundamental rule is that the soul is not a spreadsheet. You cannot reduce complex, messy human beings to widgets on an assembly line. So we need accountability, but we must fiercely resist reductionism.
Accountability without reductionism. So how do we use the numbers we do have? Because realistically, a church still counts attendance, a nonprofit still looks at giving, a business tracks volunteer or employee retention.
They have to.
The key paradigm shift here is that we have to treat these metrics as mirrors, not masters.
Mirrors, not masters. That is profound. Think about what a mirror does. A mirror can tell you if your physical posture is wildly out of alignment. It can reflect a reality that needs your immediate attention.
Right.
In an organization, a sudden, massive drop in attendance might signal a failure in leadership, or a toxic cultural shift, or a demographic change that you were ignoring. A sudden drop in volunteering or giving might reveal systemic burnout, or a lack of trust in the leadership.
So the numbers are useful.
These numbers are incredibly useful because they reveal patterns and hidden strain.
Yeah.
But, and this is the massive caveat, a mirror cannot interpret motive. It cannot measure spiritual hunger. It cannot see a wounded, cynical person who is sitting in the back row, slowly learning to trust again in secret.
You can't put a stethoscope to a spreadsheet. The numbers will tell you that a person stopped giving money. They won't tell you that they just lost their job and are too ashamed to ask for help.
Exactly.
The kingdom, the ultimate reality of healthy human flourishing, has structure, absolutely. But it is structured like a garden, not a factory. In a factory, you demand uniform output on a strict, unyielding timeline. If a widget is defective, you throw it away.
But in a garden.
In a garden, you cultivate, you prune, you water, and you wait. You respect the erratic, unpredictable seasons of growth. And this means accountability cannot be outsourced to a dashboard. It has to be deeply, fundamentally, frustratingly relational.
And if we look for the ultimate model of this, we look at how Jesus observed people. He was the master of accountability without reductionism.
How so?
When he saw Zacchaeus hiding up in the tree, he didn't just see a corrupt, widely hated tax collector, which was the visible metric. He saw the deep, desperate repentance that was about to unfold. When he looked at Peter, he saw the impulsiveness, the arrogance, and the impending catastrophic failure. But he also saw the solid rock on which a movement would be built.
He saw the whole person.
Jesus observed fruit, he demanded growth, but he never reduced a person to a mere output. He held them to an incredibly high standard of truth, but with infinite, patient, pastoral tenderness.
There's this incredible trio of metaphors used to explain the different paradigms of leadership: the surveyor, the botanist, and the gardener.
Write those down.
Think about the differences. A surveyor can come in with highly precise instruments and measure the exact boundaries of a plot of land to the millimeter. A botanist can come in, take soil samples, identify the exact genus and species of every single plant, and chart the theoretical crop yield on a whiteboard.
Both very scientific.
Right. But to truly know the garden, to understand what it actually needs to thrive and survive the winter, you cannot just survey it or study it. You have to be the gardener. You have to walk it, season by season, feeling the moisture in the soil, noticing the hidden pests, knowing exactly which plants need more direct light and which ones will wither if they aren't kept in the shade.
If we connect this to the reality of modern leadership, it means that your leadership must be proximal. It must be up close. You cannot lead a garden from a glass boardroom via a customized dashboard.
No, you have to get your hands dirty.
You have to be among the people. You absolutely have to ask the hard, uncomfortable questions. Where are people stalling out? Where is their hidden destructive behavior? Where is the deep fatigue setting in?
But you ask them differently.
Yes, you ask those questions as a shepherd who loves and cares for the flock, not as a cold bureaucrat optimizing a system for maximum quarterly yield.
So what does this all mean? Let's bring this entire massive deep dive right down to the ground, right into your life.
Yeah, for the listener.
Whether you are leading a massive tech company, managing a retail team of 5 people, pastoring a local church, raising a family, or honestly just trying to navigate the confusing trajectory of your own personal growth, you have to look at your own scoreboard.
You have to be honest with yourself.
You have to ask yourself the deeply uncomfortable questions. Are you chasing volume, or are you cultivating depth? Are you prioritizing the visible applause of the crowd, the dopamine hit of the likes, and the external validation, or are you doing the incredibly slow, hidden, unglamorous work of tending to the roots of your character?
I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to chew on as you go about the rest of your day.
Let's hear it.
Think about the most impressive, massive, ancient ruins in the world. The Colosseum in Rome, the Parthenon in Athens, the Pyramids of Giza. They are visually stunning. They were engineered by brilliant minds to project absolute power, to be seen from miles away, and to last forever as testaments to human greatness.
And they're incredible to look at.
They are, but if you visit them today, they are completely devoid of life. They are dead monuments. Now look at a simple, ordinary, unnamed forest. It doesn't look engineered, it doesn't project power, it goes through brutal, freezing winter.
It's just a forest.
It is constantly dying, shedding its leaves, looking bare and weak. But underneath the soil, out of sight, it is endlessly reproducing. It is teeming with quiet, unstoppable, generational life.
Which one are you trying to build with your brief time here? A magnificent ruin or a living ecosystem?
A magnificent ruin or living ecosystem. That is the defining choice of our lives. We started this deep dive talking about a pilot's dashboard, all the dials glowing green, lulling the crew into a false sense of security while the plane flies thousands of miles in the wrong direction.
Right.
The goal of all of this is not to take a hammer and smash the dashboard. We need numbers, we need accountability. But the goal is to make absolutely sure your internal compass is pointed toward true north.
To measure what actually matters.
To measure what actually truly matters in the end, deep obedience, genuine transformation, quiet character, and the slow, messy, generational reproduction of life. Keep digging deeper into the things that truly last, the things that survive the winter. We'll see you on the next deep dive.